that right?
All right. Hello, everyone. Well, let's get started here. My name is Tom Aungst. I want to welcome everyone. Our panelists tonight, we have Sandy and Paul Rennick. And notice I said Sandy first, I didn't say Paul. And then I want to thank them for being here. I do want to thank the cadets for allowing me to do this again. This is my fifth live streaming. We have one more coming up in June, next Thursday, 8 o'clock. We have Mark Thurston, Tim Fairbanks, Sean Vega, and Brett Kuhn talking about indoor and how that has affected drum corps. So that'll be a great talk. Also, next Tuesday, we're going to start some Brass Tuesday. So we have Matt Stratton, the captionet with the cadets. He's going to talk with some of the top brass arrangers in the activity. We have Wayne Downey, Jay Bocook. Let's see who else. Michael Klesch, Jim Prime. So that's going to be a great discussion next Tuesday. Please join us again, 8 o'clock. I also do want to mention that the 34 store has been kind of revamped, and we have some great deals on clothing and instruments as well. There's a lot of instruments there that are on sale. So if you're looking for something, go to the 34 store. These live streamings we kind of just do because it's fun. It's not a fundraiser or anything like that for the Corps. So if you'd like to donate something, 5 cents, $5, $15 would be great. Like most drum corps, we're just trying to survive. And my thing with these live streamings is we miss drum corps and it's fun to talk about it. So if you want to donate, you can go to donatecadets.org. So, all right. So tonight we have Paul and Sandy, and the title was The Secret Sauce. Something I didn't know what else to put, I guess. But I think it's, people want to know about the ingredients and the success that you guys have had. And, what is that, And I think there's different ways of measuring success, right? I mean, but if you look on something you guys have put out, let's just talk about Vanguard. The quality has been, high end, the clarity, the coordination between the front and the back, and you're consistent year after year in how you play, and you proved it again by winning another drum trophy. Okay, so you're going to have to stop, Paul. We need some other guys now. Enough. And I think it's cool too because it's a family affair,
Right.
and it's 24/7. So if stuff doesn't go well, you got to all bring it home, but if stuff goes well, and it has been going well for you, it's like, guess it's a lot of parties there at the Rennicks. So before we get into, I guess, talking about the behind the scenes stuff, I always, talk about, or you guys talk about your backgrounds. Now, I know a little bit about Paul because he has this Pennsylvania twang, kind of like I do. And he grew up, yeah, Sandy shaking her head. And I talked to Paul a couple weeks ago. So I know he grew up outside of Allentown. I grew up outside of Reading, probably 20 minutes, half an hour apart. I don't know how old you are. I'm 57. I'm thinking you're 54.
55. Yeah.
55. Okay. Well, but you're 55, but you look like you're 29 though.
Right.
Yeah. So you went to IUP, which is Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and I went to Westchester, and then eventually started marching drum corps and marched the 27th Lancers in '85. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Paul. Maybe talk about your experience there, the people that have influenced you, and how you got to, really be the best at what you do right now.
Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. We are a big fan of these podcasts. I think you have a future in podcasts, Tom. Definitely. So yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and drum corps was kind of out of the realm of possibility for me when I was a kid. I was mainly a drum set player. I got hooked up with some people in Allentown that I took mainly drum set lessons. Playing drums basically to me meant playing drum set, and then I ended up hooking up with some members of the Philadelphia Jazz Quartet when I was really young. So I was playing like 2-3 nights a week, like when I was 16 and 17 years old. So I went to college, and this is growing up in Allentown. The first time I think I'd ever seen a drum corps was totally by accident. Was walking through the park, where we all warm up. I was walking from a drum set lesson through that park to meet somebody and get a ride home, and I walked by, and then it was prelims back. Remember when Allentown used to be
Yeah.
prelims finals, and this was in the afternoon, and I walked by, and I saw this snare line warming up, and I was really mesmerized because they were playing stuff that I thought I was the only one who knew how to play, like drags and so I see this whole thing, and it really was memorable. I can still remember it. In my mind. I think it was I kind of pieced it together, and I think it was the Malden Diplomats. I'm not quite sure, but it reminded me of the way they looked. But later on, when I went to college, I ran into a bunch of friends, made a lot of really close friends that all marched in different corps. I mean, there was somebody from everywhere. There was somebody from the Bridgemen, the Phantom Regiment, the 27th Lancers, the Garfield Cadets. There was like an array of people that played, and I remember seeing my friend play like this Scottish sort of style of drumming, and I remember really really liking it. I thought it really affected me, but I could never afford to do it until I did it for 2 years. I played in the snare line for 2 years, and that's kind of once you leave home, and that was the only time I could afford to do it. So that was my experience with it.
Yeah. So now so marching in the Lancers, I know you told me a story about Charlie that you learned the music, and I talked to Charlie on his live streaming. There was a legal pad you passed down,
Right.
and it had the music on because a lot of guys couldn't read, and that was the thing too. I mean, when I started teaching in '85 at Garfield. Most of the guys couldn't read, and I kind of grew up learning how to read. I don't know if you know this, but I got my master's in jazz drum set.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I was a kind of a drum set guy myself, thinking I went to Rutgers thinking I was gonna play, in New York, and then, at some point, but the drum corps kind of took me this way. But, a lot of guys that I taught in Garfield were just, I don't know, just couldn't read. It was the same kind of thing, I guess, and so we kind of focused a lot more on the reading. So
What did Charlie say about that? Did he remember all that? I mean, that's
yeah, well, I don't know. I think he was kind of he was like, oh yeah, I guess I did that. Like he didn't remember that, like when I was telling the story, but he goes, yeah. And I said, well, I'm assuming you had a score at some point,
right.
And I'm assuming you figured out how to write it down on something that looked like manuscript paper. And I also told him, like, he came up and played on your drum or someone's drum, and you were just like, whoa, like,
Yeah.
like this guy.
The quality and the warmth, and that he was
Yeah.
a natural player, and really that was in many ways worth 1,000 hours of education. Just watching somebody play and just seeing, just sort of like really looking at it and modeling and seeing how smooth and warm it sounded was really. I can still remember
Yeah.
those moments right to this day. So
Yeah. Well, and see, my impression of technique back then, I think you and I talked about on the phone, was it was a guy like Charlie played for the line, and then you watched him play, and then that's how you play.
right.
There wasn't like all this methodology and all these terms that we use right now to define everything that we do. You know. So after the Lancers, that I know that much. What happened then? And I see photos with you with VK and Float. At least someone's pointing you out. I mean, I think it's you. So
Right.
what happened after Lancers, and how did you get to where you're at now?
Well, one of the best things that happened in undergraduate was writing music. So there was one of the other big things that's different nowadays, which is there's so many instructors. My experience was there was like a couple of guys at most that were teaching you, and there was so much alone time. There was so much time. We learned a lot by just the vets in the line would simply play, and you would just have to play with them and go down the line and sort of match. There was, like you said, there was no like really intense method of how to play. So, but the best thing for me is I obviously learned other things first and got into this a little bit later. And so writing music was always a part of what I did. And so I would there was one marching band director, and all of the rest of it was student run. And so all of the music that was written had to be written by the students. And so I eventually took on a big role in that. And that's when I really, had to crank out the charts and really start writing. And
that was at IUP, right? You're talking about?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
okay.
I graduated, and I was going to get a master's degree, and in my mind, University of North Texas was the best place in the country. And I went down there, and really, since this is I don't want to get too wordy here, but since I didn't go to college right away, I was gigging, and I played a lot of gigs, and mainly straight ahead and then commercial gigs. So that I was 1 year older. And so I was a little more focused when I went to college. And when I went down to North Texas, I just took a lot of initiative, created a lot of relationships, and then started arranging music. And within a semester or so, started writing and taking over the indoor drumline down at UNT. And that was, a big, huge part of learning how to not only write music, but having a method of teaching, having to run it with no staff, essentially, and having to sort of put it all together. And I just cut my teeth on that in a big way. And I remember arranging music for one of the percussion ensembles. It was called the Pop Ensemble, and really thrived there. I just really loved. I arranged the music for the percussion ensemble, and then Ralph Hardiman came in. Make a long story short, I introduced myself to Ralph and Tom Float, and I just cold attack walked up and introduced myself. And I was really young looking, and I asked them if they would mind like coming for a weekend at school to see the group play. And it turned out to be a good relationship that was developed. I wrote some music with Ralph, wrote one of the charts, and then Tom and I became really good friends, and we taught together for a while. When I taught the Skywriters, which was
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
which was a locally so Ralph recommended me to work at the Blue Devils, and I worked there for one season, and then came back, and I was pretty much locked into UNT. So it didn't go any further than that. And then the Skywriters moved to Texas, and so I took that over. And then they were kind of mismanaged to the point where they folded. And then I called Float up, who was teaching at the VK at the time, and I said, "Hey, do you have any spots for any of these guys?" And so the entire line basically combined with their line, and it was hilarious. It was 1994. And just a lot of other topics we can talk about how I learned other things, but we taught together, we were close friends, and but it was always like we taught together. It wasn't like I was a player or anything like that. But.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I didn't know about. Again, I've seen pictures of you in front of, VK, but your experience in writing and the jazz drum set. I mean, I would think like in my writing too. I mean, the drum set, my experience, and I remember going to get my master's, and the guy said, "All right, so what do you want to get out of this?" And I said, "Well, I'm probably not going to go play professionally, so I want to have a master's, but somehow, hopefully, I can apply this to my writing." And so I think some of the stuff, thickings and the patterns and stuff that I write, might kind of seem like it's more drum set piece. Even if it's a classical piece, So,
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to Sandi. I don't know a lot about you, and your background in drum corps. And now I know the both of you are. Well, congratulations, right? You're both working at UNT.
Yeah.
Right? That's awesome. So congratulations. So Sandi, what's your background like?
I grew up in the Northwest, and I didn't know anybody. Like, I was just telling somebody about this. Like, I knew nothing about drum corps. I would see it like if the band director like played it for the marching band, or would play it at rehearsal, and would show the PBS broadcast. I was just joking with somebody that I would watch, like, I can vividly remember watching the 1993 PBS broadcast, like when it was shown, and seeing the Star of Indiana and thinking it was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Wait, you were supposed to say the cadet. Wait a minute here. Justin, can we...
I'm sorry. No, but here's the thing, Tom.
No,
I had no idea that they were showing it in like the order of finish. So I'm like, I'm watching Retreat. Like I'm waiting to see who's gonna win. Yeah, and I mean, congratulations, I guess. But let's face it. We all know who we talk about in '93. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
So like years later, so yeah, I didn't know anybody that did it. Where going to school. Like anybody that's like currently in school, like a lot of those guys, they're all like just getting out of school now. Like if it were a regular year, you go until mid-June, you start after Labor Day, and it's like a different schedule. So I didn't know anybody that had done this, and then my parents had. I ended up going to school. Again, it's very similar to Paul's experience, like just kind of finding it all by accident. What is funny, and I think what really has drawn me to drum corps in a lot of ways, is I grew up playing really competitive sports, both in soccer and softball. And so I think the competitive side of music, I don't know, I find that all very fascinating. I enjoy that whole, like I like being a coach, and I like the teaching part of it. And I don't know, I really just enjoy that aspect. But I was really, really into I wanted to be a marimba soloist. I want to be a player, and that was really my angle and what I wanted to do with percussion. So yeah, it was just completely accidental. I remember going to my first show when Paul, he got the job teaching at the Carolina Crown as the caption head there in '98, even though he had just folded 2 corps previous. Yeah, I know. Watch out, everybody. But he had just done that like twice, right? Yeah. Not even just once, twice. And well, if you count Lancers, that's like...
Oh, that's 3.
That's
Paul,
3. I know.
I'm thinking of that too, and Paul put his head down. I think he's thinking about the Lancers. So 3, Paul.
I know. He could have worked a little harder at Blue Devils, I guess. Yeah. I'm just kidding. Anyways. But yeah, so he hired, at that time, it was all people from, like his, it was all like North Texas, people all going to go teach at Crown at that time. And it was really exciting. I had no idea what I was getting into. Like again, being in the area at North Texas, I transferred about like halfway through my undergrad, and got to know, all of a sudden I'm meeting people who are like in all these broadcasts that I had watched. And I just thought it was really fascinating, because again, it was a whole side of music that was totally foreign to me. And so just developing that appreciation, even though it was just coming a little later. But yeah, going out on tour, I remember the first time, like what do we do now? Like, oh, we get a tape. The judge gives us a tape. Like, how that's so beneficial to it. Oh my God! Now we get to go talk to the judge after the show.
Yeah.
And give them feedback. Wow, that's a great system. Yeah,
basically what she's saying is I totally fooled her into doing it. I completely, I tricked her into doing it completely. So.
Right. Well, that's funny, because I was just kind of thinking, you guys are a duo that. You've been together doing this, right? Yeah. And, Neil and I have been doing it for a long time. I kind of roped Neil in last year. I tricked him. But, Neil did march in a drum corps, but he played like trios when he was like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11. But how he got into writing for the front ensemble was, I used to see what he did with his band. He came down through Vic Firth, and he just had that, Neil, he's pretty intense. And I always tell people, like, if there's 50 people coming down an alley and I have to pick one person to go with me down that alley, I'm picking Neil. Right?
I picked Neil too.
So he didn't really have that experience writing. And, I think maybe it was a good thing too, because it was like he had to explore different things. Like, maybe if you do it for a while and you're on the same thing, it's like you pick up things, like maybe for yourself, and for Neil, it was like it was like fresh, and it was like you could just explore different things that maybe if you're doing it, you might be afraid to or something, you know. But I think that's really cool. I didn't realize that. For some reason, I thought you marched. I thought you marched like in VK, in my head. And I had, I don't know, I didn't know Paul folded 3 chords. Now that
He's not done yet, Tom. He's not done yet. No, no, he honestly, I think I can remember that first year teaching. Like again, what I loved about it was that you're on the road the entire summer because why go home, and you had a captive audience for like 12 hours a day.
Right.
And I thought, as a young, like full of energy and like with all this knowledge in my head at that time, so I thought, like, I just loved it. And so I think that's what I really enjoyed about the summer was that, you're really only at the mercy, the groups are at the mercy of the energy level of the teacher, really, in the big picture. Yeah. And so I understood that, and I just really, really went all in. But, those, and in fact, probably, it would probably still be this way now, but I remember that whole first year, like I wouldn't say a word. Like I wasn't writing. I didn't know how to write. I wasn't doing any of that yet. Paul was writing everything. And I just sat and listened. I was terrified to say anything in critique, and I just observed. And it's funny, like through rehearsals and just being in that environment, that immersion, I think
right.
it really had a huge impact on me when I did start slowly, taking over some of the writing responsibilities. I just realizing that, wow, I know what, like, I have some of these answers because without even realizing that I had just gotten that experience through just being there.
Well, all that's really cool. What you were talking about competition, and I mean, I'm really competitive too. I mean, Julie knows, anyone knows it. It's like I always tell the kids, I'm like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. If we're not gonna do it, then I'm not gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? Like if we're gonna practice indoor from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, then we're gonna seriously do it. And it's the competition kind of, I guess, drives me in a way that, and it does the kids too. They move up the ladder and they strive for the excellence. So who's more competitive between the two of you?
We should ask our kids.
I don't know.
I think they'd probably.
Yeah. I mean, Paul seems like a sweetheart. Are you a sweetheart, Paul, or is it?
It's all a facade. No, this is so many things are going through my head now. It's crazy, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I've actually written a couple of articles about competition and design and art, and without competition, it wouldn't be the same. I don't think. I think people try harder. You are constantly aware that there are other people out there like yourself and the other guys doing it, that they're bringing the A game, and it helps you behind the scenes really prepare for that. And I think that over the years, the one thing that has fueled that is a really sincere love for doing it. I just love the way it sounds. I love hearing it. I love the teaching environment. I think it's, everything about it, I think it's such a potentially healthy thing, like to have like Sandi said, the captive audience, and just sort of, you could use that to teach so many things. And then the competition, I think, is the thing that lights it up. Is the thing that it's that deadline mentality. You have a show tonight. There's going to be other groups that are competing. We need you to, all right? And it's just a motivating thing. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So I did 15 weeks of Zoom classes with my school. And I did high school like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I had, with my high school students, for 15 weeks, I basically had 100% attendance.
Right.
100%. Now, and if they couldn't make it, I'd get, somebody's telegram, Mr. Aungst, I have an appointment. Mr. Aungst, yep, no problem. It was middle school and elementary. It was, it was dicey, it was Swiss cheese. But it was because they know that competition is there at some point, whether it's, the indoor, the marching band. And I tell them, it's like, this is where we can really get a leg up, even though it's Zoom, but it's just interesting. And I think to myself, like, if I didn't really have that, it would have been Swiss cheese for the high school, but we had auditions and kids are moving around, and they know what's at stake, with the indoor stuff. So, the competition is it, and I think we wrote some stuff for, was it Paul Byers' book?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the questions. It was about competition, and I said I think competition is great. You just have to use it. You have to put everything in perspective, use it with a grain of salt, and it's a great teaching method. But it can't be the end all. It can't determine how you're going to act or how you're going to wake up the next morning. Things don't go your way, then you gotta get back in there. But it definitely fuels me. I miss that right now.
You know what I miss? I miss the like the 3-block days. The productivity of the summer is something that is hard to explain. I don't know what people do when they don't do drum corps, like normal people, because it is so productive. What other time in your life you're getting up at like 8 a.m. and you have like 3 full blocks of productive activity and then something to show for it at night, and then you do it all over again for months. I just think talk about the value of time and just using your time, like, consistently every day. You're doing something, you're making progress every single day. I miss that about it.
Well, and then as a writer, I mean, I feel like when all cylinders are happening and it's a great performance, there's nothing like it. And I'm not talking about winning or losing. I'm talking about when the group it's happening and they're playing your stuff and you're just like, man, or even the little 5-minute countdown. Every time I listen to that, I'm like, yeah, it's good. Damn it. People are clapping and stuff. It's just there's an energy about all of that I think we all kind of miss. Like, I took a 6-mile bike ride this afternoon down in Providence with my son, and man, there's some of these. It kicked my butt, but I really enjoyed it. But I was like, tonight would have been, for the East Coast, would have been the preview in Indianapolis tonight.
Right.
And so I was like, but I don't know. I'm doing the podcast or the live streaming, so I guess that's as close as we're going to get to it. So
right. let me I'll talk a little bit about how we started a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I did nothing but work and write and teach. I mean, it was just absolutely a little bit obsessive compulsive and sort of just constantly in my office all the time. And then we had met, and I remember thinking, like, I got to figure this out, like in terms of just time management. And then I taught Sandi how to use Finale. totally fooled her. I said, yeah, it's easy. Look, you can just hit this button and that, right? Yeah, completely. And so I think it was a matter of sustainability, because I initially got into it thinking that everybody wrote everything. That was just kind of my mindset. I don't know why I thought that. I thought, like, if you were going to be the percussion arranger, you had to write everything. And so I did for years and years, kind of kept that with the North Texas indoor thing the whole time. And eventually it would become unsustainable. And so Sandi is a genius, a fabulous marimba player. It just has a touch and just the quality of playing. And I thought this could be perfect. I mean, if we just figured out how to do it. And then I think over a period of time, it became clear to me that the way that we see the world musically is the same. Like, there are certain things that she wrote that independently would write that I think, yeah, that's exactly the way I think it should sound. Or I would give direction, sort of outline the form or sort of explain how it goes. And she'd be in total agreement with it and thinking, yeah. So the fact that we see things the same musically is a huge thing. I don't know. I mean, I think with you and Neil is probably the same way, where you sort of see the world the same way. And I don't know how you could do it otherwise, honestly.
Yeah, well, we used to talk about it. I guess I was the lead on it, and I still do it. Sometimes Neil would get upset with me. He's like, yeah, you wrote just about everything, because I would, I kind of grew up in but you should kind of write everything either. So I wrote the pit. I wrote everything 92, 93, 90, most of 94 that Neil came on. But it was, we were having a child, and it was like, okay, I this is like overwhelming. And I was at Dartmouth doing everything. And at Dartmouth for indoor for up until '05, I wrote the drill, the front ensemble, the battery, and taught it all.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I
Like
can't,
Tuesdays,
like I can't. In order for me to survive and continue, I got to let other people do some other stuff. But Neil and I would talk about it like, I'd have notes or whatever on or a sketch or something, and we talk, and I'd say like one word, or I'd say something. He goes, "Yeah, you mean like this?" And and then there's times too where I'd write something, and I'll say, "Okay, you do your thing," because I don't want to be so anal about what we should do, because I want him to be creative too. So here's a space where I'm not gonna do anything and see what happens. And a lot of times those were as good as the ones where it was talked about or sketched out.
Right.
Because he was, sometimes if I'm too anal about what I do, then he's not as creative as I guess he could be sometimes. But yeah, you're right. It was like, I don't know if did you guys have arguments? I mean, imagine Neil and I arguing though.
Honestly, you have to have control because you're in charge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was exactly the same. I have to control this because I'm in charge. I'm accountable to this. But there comes a great feeling when you agree and you collaborate, and then there's a trust that's built up, and then I can sort of explain. Right, we know each other so well that we talk about it. We don't have meetings to talk about things. You know what I mean? Like you're probably the same way about like conference calls. I mean, they're all scheduled. They're exactly. Well, a lot of times we'll figure some stuff out like completely at like the breakfast table, or like at odd times. It'll be at night, like the kids are in bed and we're sitting there and say, I was thinking we should do this. And then I sort of explain what I'm thinking. Then it'll percolate and brew, and she'll say, "Okay, let me think of, we'll figure this out." And then it, I figured out how to let go a little bit and be able to just provide parameters. You know what I mean? Like guardrails, and say, "Look, it has to be here. Programmatically, I want this to happen," and then we go from there. Yep. I think it makes life easier for her and for anybody else working.
So I saw Sandy's eyes when you mentioned the word. You said control, and she went. So Sandy, tell us. Don't tell me. Tell us about Paul. I mean, I know me. I'm aggressive. I am anal. I do stuff way in advance. It takes me months to write stuff. I mean, when it goes to the kids, I've had 40 versions. I mean, is Paul like that? What is Paul like?
What's funny is I think one thing that has developed over time, like we have 3 kids, and we've had to get a lot better at doing this. Like we've had to get more efficient. We like Paul said, where he had to trick me into learning how to use Finale, just to not only be obsessively involved in every aspect of it. It's kind of like that with us. Like, I mean, we have a child right now at a soccer practice that hopefully is going to come home in about 45 minutes. Like there's a schedule. Like now like there are just other things that that take importance, and so we have to become more efficient. I joke that I operate on a need to know basis. I can't be on those Monday afternoon conference calls. I like all of the people involved very, very much, and I love the team, and it's fantastic. But I mean, we got stuff to do, and so when it's time to get to that point, I would say that we're not really advanced. Like we're not doing things in advance. I think Paul always jokes if I yell at him like, send me that chart because camp's in 2 days. He's like, you're a pressure player. He likes kind of throwing that in there, like, oh, you got it. You're gonna. Because I think for me, and this is from I can think from middle school, like the very first assignment I probably ever had to do that was given a deadline. Like I definitely, I consider it all part of the process. It's all just happening subconsciously inside of me, and then it all just comes out right there at the last possible moment. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I need those deadlines. I need that, like the camp schedule or that rehearsal is happening. But
Yeah.
also at the same time, like what I'm balancing it with would be, um, like, okay, nap time, or we got to pick up the kids from school at this point. I mean, long gone are those days of I'm just going to stay up all night and get this done, which, there's a lot of that too at some point in my life, in both of our lives. But we've just had to figure out how to get better at it. I think there can't be 40 versions anymore because we just don't have time.
Right. Well, I think for me now too, it's you know, you have other people around you that can take over certain things. So I just kind of do my thing. At the core right now, I'm the battery arranger and the program facilitator. So, the facilitating with April and the people I have there, it's like herding cats, like 1,000 cats, right? That's a job in itself, trying to manage all that. But I still enjoy the writing part, and I have a new partner now. His name's Brandon Carita. I mean, Neil is the front ensemble facilitator. So he doesn't write. He kind of manages what they're, teaching the young guys, kind of guiding Brandon. But Brandon has been my writer at Dartmouth. I think this will be 5 years with the marching band, the indoor. Now, what he comes with, he does everything from the front ensemble to the sound to you name it, man. This guy is like, and here's the thing. He's a self-taught jazz pianist and brilliant. I mean, his you would think he's like playing professionally if you see him play. He's never really formally learned how to play drums, but when he went to school, he was bored with piano, so he started taking lessons on percussion. And you should see this guy play. And he'll pick up some sticks and play some, rudimental stuff. I'm like, where'd you play that in high school? He goes, I've never really played.
Wow.
He's just one of these kind of guys that just picks the stuff up. But we already have a connection where, he just kind of knows when I write stuff, like, how we should connect and how we should coordinate. And again, it's nice having Neil there, to just kind of oversee things. And having Neil there last year, that's why we were better. Because in the activity, you got to have the whole package. You can't just have a snare line. You got to have the whole thing. And we were better because of having Neil come in and, just slapping people around, I guess, That's what he does, which is good. You got to do that sometimes.
Tom, when you had that, when I first started teaching in '98, like I was thinking back to the live stream that you did with with Jim Casella, Jeff Lee, Eric Johnson,
Oh, yeah.
Neil, because I'm like, that's when I started teaching. Like that was, the shows when, you're on road all summer and there's a retreat at every show. So you see everybody. And those were that was the top 4 at the time. And
Yep.
so, yeah, I just remember like just watching those groups at that time and just how influential that was just in my exposure to the activity,
Yeah. Yeah, man, that was 23 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, 2000 in my head seems like it's like 5 years ago.
Right.
Then you go, that was 20 years ago. It's crazy. So these technique talks started because I'm fascinated with technique. That's what I do all day. I teach elementary, middle, and high school, and it's about technique and getting the kids to play. I've probably revamped how I've done things, I don't know, 20 times. Because I go, okay, I thought that was pretty good, and I saw someone do something else. Let's try that. Oh, that's pretty good. And I kind of get that in what I call my toolbox of techniques or teaching. What is, I guess maybe either of you can answer this. What is your technique and approach? Like, what do you think about when you're teaching a line? Like, I know you had to do a clinic today for Matt Savage's, group, Paul. Like, what is? I mean, you talk about stroke, about sound. What is it?
I'm totally guilty of trying to give too much information. Fit 10 pounds into a 9-pound bag during any clinic. I feel terrible sometimes.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I teach a class at UNT. I teach lessons, but I also teach a couple of classes. And one of the classes is twice a week for 2 hours at a time, and it's like a 12-week semester. And so I've gotten to the point now where each class is like a chapter of a book, and there's enough topics that kind of last for the entire semester. And I think that I was more or less self-taught. I didn't have lessons. I didn't grow up as you probably understand. Like in Pennsylvania at that time, there wasn't like a band director dedicated towards percussion at all. It was all just like listening to records, figuring out how to play by rote and learning how to play on your own. Sort of in my basement, I learned how to play. And it wasn't until later that I understood that there were certain names and techniques that were assigned to the ways that I played. And I had never, honestly, I had never heard of the Moeller method until I went to college and to graduate school. That had never been mentioned. I was influenced by Joe Morello, taught in the area, and everybody that I knew either took a lesson with Joe Morello or studied with him or was a student of somebody who studied with Joe Morello.
Right. And
that was kind of the George Lawrence Stone stick control sort of method. But it wasn't like a school of thought. And so everything that I had to teach was completely by necessity, because I was thrown into a situation where there were good players and I had to keep them interested, and I had to figure out what to teach them and how to play. And I just logically thought, the best thing about teaching is the what you learn from it. Like you learn how to analyze your own playing and how to get like that smooth, warm sound, and you have to figure out how to say it. And over years, I just figured out a method that kind of splits the difference between the Moeller method and the Stone approach. Using efficiency and movement to create smoother, more lyrical rhythms. And it's so in depth that it's hard to talk about like as one thing. There's so many things involved in playing. It's like a really thorough thing, and it starts way early. There are discussions about ear training and listening skills like all the way back, like in November. Or it's like a lifelong kind of thing. And so I find myself teaching and talking about bigger musical concepts and thinking about the long term, right? I think sometimes in drum corps you can get completely lost in the minutia, the 3-6-9 and sort of like all of the minor details that ultimately come out in the wash, and the bigger picture things like direction and musically, how to connect rhythms and how to shape something and phrase something. And I get them. I'm not trying to go on and on about it, but I try to get the players to understand the form and structure of the music more than anything. So if they understand like how it's put together, they will play it in a certain way. And I've got like a billion stories I can tell you about thing, but I honestly think to some degree technique is a little overrated, because I've seen some weak players sound really good. I've seen some drum set players that really had very little technique sound killer and just really amazing. So that I put 2 and 2 together and think, wow, okay, so if you're a slave to your technique, then that's kind of sometimes going to take away. So it has to be an absolute balance, Yeah.
So. Well, my teacher at Rutgers, Keith Copeland, and he wrote a couple books and stuff, and he was a brilliant teacher. And he's the one that said to me, he goes, "What do you want to get out of this?" And I kind of told him my drum corps background. And the method I studied was Alan Dawson. So
right.
All Alan Dawson's, his rudimental ritual stuff. It was like first time I did some of that, I fell off the seat, because you play it in your hands, then you do, bass drum and the hi-hat is one pattern, then you do 4 other ones, and you switch the bass and the hi-hat. I'm like, Jesus, like really?
I remember seeing that at PASIC. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Clinic at PASIC and did the whole thing, like did a clinic and talked during the whole thing, and he played the entire rudimental ritual with brushes. It was
yes.
I still remember that.
Yeah, the brushes, man. So, but my teacher, if you watched him play, because you're just talking about like technique and whatever. It was almost like I don't know, like someone just picking up a pair of sticks that has never played before.
Right.
Like he's just like pick it up, and it was just like I'm like, but if you close your eyes and you listen to him play, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
The touch and how we got around the drums, and I mean, I went and see he played and he used to play at the Village Vanguard or in Fat Tuesday. Go in and see him play, and if you just close your eyes and listen to him fit and blend with his trio or his big band that he played with, it was brilliant. But if you watched him play,
Right.
he was always like, man, he's like, Tom, your technique is like, oh, perfect. How do you make it sound like that, And he was just like, his hands would flip over. And I said, man, if someone judged you, you'd be in trouble because your technique sucks. But I think you're right, and I think one of my faults as I get older is, I try not to over technique. I try not to over teach. And sometimes I'm very detailed in the music, but when I teach it, I kind of go, oh, well, yeah, maybe we should play like that. Or maybe we should play that. Oh, maybe we should, all right, crescendo. You know what I'm saying? So I adjust based on when I get it out there in when the kids are playing it.
Yeah.
And the other part of it too is like, I don't know how you are, but I write as a technician. So I write thinking about how we're going to play it. And I'm always thinking about how we're going to play it on a drum, not on a pad. You know what I'm saying? Because you can play on a pad and it's like, oh, it sounds good. So I'm thinking, okay, how's that going to be on a drum with, a certain head on? So I'll even think about like, should I use more velocity or more rebound? And but I think the older I get, I kind of go, let's adjust as we go. So I still use the height thing that Hannum taught me. It's like 3, 6, 9, 12 kind of thing. And I think it's so ingrained. But really, when we get it out there, it goes away because based on musically what we're trying to do. And I think like what you're saying, it's like it's more of a big picture thing. Then I'm not gonna. We used to play like we'd spend like an hour on 2 beats trying to play taps like that.
Right.
When I marched, it was like, and then and then really when you get out there, you're running around. The taps are like up here. It doesn't really matter.
Ultimately, I think, and I'm totally realizing that we're on this podcast, and everything I can say can probably offend somebody in some way. But ultimately, what it comes down to is people agreeing on how to interpret the music.
Right.
And they need to agree on it. And I think, there's so much information in society right now. I mean, you can Google anything. You can get any information you want. And I think sometimes the students just think, if I only had this right bit of knowledge, or if we only played more in time, then we'd be cleaner. And then I think that's a false equivalent. Right. I think that right now, I mean, you could argue for days who's in time and who's not in time, because you can divide a beat infinitesimally, and then you can have 2 guys in time that just aren't together. Right. And I think ultimately speaking, you have to get players that can stand on their own 2 feet, hold their own from a playing standpoint, and then just agree on the interpretation, and then just commit to that. And then I think that, I think that when you try to control things to that little tiny level, technically, that sometimes their mind will go to that instead of to playing together. See what I mean? Like now all of a sudden you got Johnny on the end of the snare line worried about his little finger, rather than him worrying about other musical things. And I think that's my only fear about it. But I definitely agree with you in terms of, I don't forego the technique at all. I mean, we completely go there.
Listen, you can say what you want. You're kicking everyone else's ass. I mean, you can say, well, you know what? We don't practice. We go get ice cream for the kids most, and you can do that. When you're doing what you're doing and you're competitively winning, Paul, you don't have to apologize for anything.
No. Don't you agree? Like drum corps gets so many. There's so many opinions, right? There's so many people that just really stick their flag in the ground, and I think ultimately, that you gotta find your way to say something. We probably all say similar things. We just have to find our way to say it that communicates it the way we want it to end up. And
So how does that for the front ensemble? Is that something now that kind of Sandy has taken over as far as the technique, or do you have, I mean, the one thing I was happy with for decades at the cadets was my techs were guys that I taught.
Right.
Came out, and so even the front ensemble was just like we had guys. I had a snare tech there was 9 years. I had a bass guy there was for 25 years.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it was, you just had this culture that was kind of there, and you didn't really have to do. We didn't really teach. We didn't talk about how we were going to teach.
Right.
It just happened because, they were all part of the system.
Yeah, we definitely speak the same language. There's no question about it. I'm kind of in the same place that you're describing.
Right.
All of my old students teach, and all of them speak the same language. They don't just repeat the same words. They totally understand.
Right.
They're successful musicians on their own right, and they are responsible people, and they get it. And when they say it, they say very similar things, and we all agree about how, I learned several things in crash courses, like in different parts of my life. And I remember in the 93 Skyriders, a lot of the time I was the only
the second core you folded. No, that was your third.
We lost count by that time. And so I remember having to teach everything essentially, and so I had to go to get the battery guys to go off and get them started, and then go with the pit, and then I would have to teach. And so I came up with a lot of exercises that were very fundamental and really established a technique. I had a lot of players that had never played before,
right.
And so you really had to build. It was chopping out for keyboards, and we've expanded that repertoire of exercises to be like a book of exercises, and everybody kind of speaks the same language, and everyone agrees. I mean, fundamentally, it's a like a Stevens approach.
Yeah. I mean, Paul will understate this. He's actually a really good marimba player, and I would say that he's probably gigged. You've had more marimba gigs, playing gigs, than I have in the last couple of years. So I'll be honest. But yeah, I think that was kind of the whole thing. Like my approach being like a pretty serious marimba player. Yeah, it was all about the Stevens grip and the technique. I really was like a pretty serious marimba nerd for a large part of my education. Just really, learning the method of movement that Lee Howard Stevens book. But I also had started with Burton grip. That was the first 4-mallet grip I had ever learned. And so, yeah, I think using both and just really not changing anything. And I would say even now, I teach private lessons at a couple of different places, and my keyboard students there, we're not changing any. The showbiz part may be different, but for the most part, the fundamental way that we are creating sound and teaching, importantly, teaching them how to actually listen to what they're doing. That I think is a big part of it that transcends whatever the activity is that we're playing. And if it's inside learning something for a jury or a recital, or if you're outside in the drum corps, that ability to listen is so huge.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing though that she's understating is the ability for someone to just go up to a keyboard or an instrument or a snare drum and just play something and make it sound exactly the way you want is priceless. I think that's absolutely priceless. And I remember specific times where I'm up in the box and Sandy's down there, and then trying to change a part or do something, and Sandy will go up to the keyboard and play it, and I'll say, yes, I want them to sound like that. Right? And then just the power of somebody demonstrating something is essential. And I think sometimes instructors kind of stand back and they don't engage with playing anymore, or they just sort of don't you think? I think that it's very tempting for an instructor to stand back and not say anything, to sort of cross their arms, and so Sandy's ability to walk up to a keyboard and play like they should play is really crucial. It's essential.
Well, if I'm in front of a drum line, I have to play. I can't stop. Even at school, I'm constantly playing. Some of it is I want to keep myself going. And then some of it is I want I want them to kind of emulate the way I'm playing. You know,
Right.
here's a funny story. So when I first started teaching in '85, you know, we had a lot of guys that didn't come back in '84. Even though we won, it was like the summer was a mess. So we had a lot of new guys, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to teach them how to play by me playing in the line. So I played in the line. Like when we did the exercises, I got in there and played. You know, I even remember playing for ensemble. Like we'd go into Teterboro into calf, you know, and I'd get in there playing. Because it was like I wanted to show them the energy that they had to put into it. Right. I wanted to show them, you know, like, you know, it just wasn't about playing the notes. Or you got to bring yourself to it. And I just remember now, you know, at some point you're like, okay, I'm not going to go in there. I'm not going to like actually learn the drill. But I remember I knew everyone's part and everyone's dot. Like it was like I was so. I mean, that's how I am. I'm like people are amazed sometimes. I can remember things like I can't remember where my phone's at. Like earlier, I'm like, guys, where the hell's my phone? I'm walking around the house. I'm like, I know I have it and it's in my pocket, right? You know, I'm like, where are my glasses? And I can run my face. But I can tell you, like with the drum corps stuff, I can remember things that are like people are like, how do you know that? I go, I have no idea. It's just like I can remember detail things, dots, you know, and where, you know, kids have some issues and all that kind of stuff. I think it's just, here's the thing. I do cadets, I do Dartmouth. I'm one of these kind of guys, I got to be there, I got to be in it. It's about the process. It's not about just kind of, you know, sending the parts. I got to do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes with the techs, it's like they know when I get in there, it's time for them to get the lawn chairs out, you know, because I just.
It's true. Very, very similar approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Paul, even to this day now, like I remember the last year that I was on the road, it was '06, and we were at Phantom Regiment, and I was pregnant with our first child, and he wasn't born until Christmas, so, you know, it wasn't totally horrifying that I was on drum corps tour, a little bit, but like that summer, I think Paul missed like 6-7 days of rehearsal the entire summer, you know, and that's just the way he did it. And now, you know, one thing we're missing this summer is racking up all those frequent flyer miles.
Yeah.
We use those in the winter to go skiing. No, that's a big part of it. You know, part of the deal of going to Vanguard was, you know, at the time we had 2 kids, but it was, you know, he can't be gone
Right.
for a long time. Like he's in and out every single week. I think he put 60 some days on the road still, and I don't know that he knows how to do it any other way. And again, my own competitive spirit would be like, you know, get out there and save the drum corps. Like, what are you doing here? Like,
Yeah.
We can FaceTime.
I have to call home to see if I can come home.
I'll be like, I don't know. I'm looking at the recap, and yeah.
Well, I did 65 days last year.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can kind of do it any other way, really. Of course you can, and people do, and I get that, but the only true knowledge is through experience, and you can tell somebody how to play all day long. You can tell them the way it has to be, but until you get them, or until you demonstrate it or play it for them or get in it and sort of do it for them, they're not going to really know what you're talking about. Music is a language. You know, we can describe technique all we want, but ultimately it's like, it's got to go like this, and then you show them.
Right. Well, I think the other thing too is how you teach, the energy, and it's funny. Kids know it. It's like, you know, to me it's all about reps and not a lot of talking. You know, and you know, I've worked with some people over decades where, all right, you know, cut. All right, it's like, you know, like a minute later, I marched in some lines like that. You're like. And then you tap off, and no one knows even what you're supposed to play, right? And I just think of like as a coach,
talk, more rock, yeah.
Well, you can teach someone, you can show someone how to shoot three pointers, but you got to do 200 of them a day.
Yeah.
You got to come in and do it, and so that's my thing. And plus there's an energy, and there's something that happens when you're playing, right? If you're just hanging out. I mean, information is one thing, but it's like, okay, now let's do it, and let's make it part of who you are. It can't, the information is like, okay, that's great, but so
I think the bottom line is like you got to enjoy the daily grind, and I think I still do.
I do.
I still enjoy the daily grind. I like rehearsing. I like explaining the music. I like hearing it come to life. I like when they light it up, and I like when everything's hitting. There's nothing like it, really. It's fun for them and you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like, people like say, "What's your hobby?" I'm like, "Well, I got it. It's my work, my hobby, everything." It's like, we do indoor practices in January and February. It's like basically 9 in the morning till 9 at night. And I don't know, I still like doing it. I still like getting there and seeing the progress. And you get tired, but at 57 years old, doing it 40 some years. I feel like if I get tired of it and I'm not excited about going anymore, that's when maybe it's time to give it up.
I'll tell you one thing that we have done that I think has changed a little bit on the approach is really limiting the rehearsals, like making because I totally agree. I've been part of many rehearsals that were sort of endless, right? In other words, you start and somebody asks when you're done, and you say when it's clean, right? And I think that has changed in me. I don't know when, but over the last 10 or 12 years, I limit rehearsals. Like, for example, when we move in, I have the percussion section for a week before the corps gets there,
yeah.
Right? And then I make sure we don't actually start until 10 a.m. And then I give an hour and a half break for the meals instead of an hour. And I think that mentality, especially being from the East Coast, was like, you got to work. You got to get out there early. You got to 30-minute breaks. But I found personally that from a teaching standpoint, there's a sense of urgency when you have a shorter rehearsal that, like when you're starting at 10, you can expect people, you give them time to get there a little early. And then they figure things out. So when I get there and we start, everyone's there and they're all ready to go. And then I say, look, we're ending at 1, and that's when we're going to stop. We need to have this, and this done by 1. And there's like a sense of urgency, and they know so you compress that amount of energy and productivity into a shorter period of time, and they become more intense about it. I found that when you open up the rehearsal to be really, really long, then it seems endless to them, and then they don't put out as much. So I kind of like shorter spurts with a little bit longer breaks becomes a little bit more productive. I think in the end, we end up getting what we need to get done. So.
Well, I agree. I mean, there's, I talk about my school here. It's like we got 3 hours on an evening rehearsal, and we got to get a lot of stuff done. So it's how you plan it. And then there are some of those drum corps rehearsals like, all right, you got a 4-hour sectional block after a 4-hour marching block, and then a 3-hour ensemble. It's like, okay, so really we're, how productive are we going to be? And it's happening the Monday before championships.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
The worst time in the world.
you're over in the grass going, I'm like, okay, somehow I got to motivate them. So sometimes I'll just, you know what? We're going to take an hour break at the end before we. My thing is, if I'm on tour, I am not waiting in line for food. So if I'm running rehearsal, we're ending early anyway. That's one thing. But I go, hey, 4 hours, we're doing 3. We're doing 3.5, and we're going to give you guys a little bit of a break. The old days at Garfield, it was like,
sacrilege.
Yeah, it was just like, it's like, bam, we would just. But it would kind of go the other way. You'd see the corps maybe not grow as much as they could have because, by the time you've done 16 hours of rehearsal and you're doing a run through and then you're sitting here listening to the horns like, holy crap, like, is it?
I really do think. I think that one of the best things that about Sandi not being like. Doing drum corps from when she was 8 years old and on. I think that in the 80s, or in the earlier drum corps days, it almost entirely punishment based.
Right.
Like
Oh, yeah.
I think anybody in that time period would readily admit that it was all like, do this or else,
Right.
or there would be like some price to pay for a mistake or a roll scroll, or I mean, it was all punishment based. And I think once I got out of that, and Sandy fortunately is probably the most positive person ever in terms of just the feeling of rehearsals, and I think that once we got outside of the punishment based teaching systems, I think then you have to be creative about like turning the screws a little bit, but then you can't be, it's tricky. It didn't take much thought to like just threaten somebody.
Yeah. Well, it was really teaching through intimidation.
Yeah.
That's how, and I'm not blaming anyone. That's just what it was.
Right.
And then you kind of do that, and then you get older and you teach, and you realize that it's definitely not the best method as far as getting it to perform at a high level. And for me now, it's like, I know I can be intimidating, so I don't have to worry about that part. Like I can be scary, and so I have to do this. I have to bring it down. And if my son's listening right now, I have a lot of bad jokes. And so what I even try to do, I try to make rehearsal so it's not too intense, because it can get pretty crazy to the point where they get pissed off at themselves, and it's just like they can't get back. So the older I get, I almost like I want them to relax more. I want to be relaxed more. Now, if there's a time when you're not giving me what I need, I'm gonna definitely tell you. But if you're motivated in a positive way, and I'm motivated in a positive way, we're probably going to get more done, and you're going to perform better than if you're like, you keep riding that one kid on the end of the snare line.
Yeah.
You're like, Jonathan, get out of here. And then, so now you get 3 hours of rehearsal left. You just kick Jonathan out, and you're like, and everyone's looking like, okay. And those next 3 hours are probably crappy.
Yeah.
And then 4 hours later, you go, okay, what did we really even get done? So, I mean, I agree. I think maybe it's age, but I think for me,
honestly, we don't even use profanity anymore.
Yeah.
I know that's a crazy thing too in drum
corps. No.
But we don't at all. I think a lot of what I do and a lot of what we do together has been, there's been some experience that has been that crossroads where I've seen it. I'll never forget coming back from a critique once. I can't remember what year it was. I'm not going to say too much about it specifically, but I remember seeing a corps director or an older guy just handing it to these 3 snare drummers. They obviously did something wrong, right? And they crossed the line. He lined them up, and everybody's walking out from critique, and this guy is dropping F-bombs. And these kids, I'm telling you, these kids are probably like 16, 15. Right. And I just looked at that and said, something about that's not right. That is not the way things should be happening. I remember really changing, just being aware of my surroundings and seeing that stuff happen over and over again, and just thinking like how much fun is that kid having? Like, what kind of experience is that? Like, what's the end result going to be? Right? It's going to be that kid trying to get away with even more, I think. So we treat it as professionally as possible. It is an absolute, like we talk about music, just like we do in the university. It's a very professional thing, but obviously we bring a lot of energy to it. I'm animated. I'm not like a bookworm sitting up there. I don't use the scores anymore because I just know the music, right? I don't think we have updated scores between the two of us.
No.
I feel good then. Thank you, because I don't either.
Right? We have so many scores with. I've got like a whole bin of red pens, that I make corrections with. But after a while, I mean, we don't even use the score anymore. We just sort of, we know the music so well, and so do the staff, honestly, and so do the players. And we just talk about it and treat them like professionals, and just have expectations,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest part, honestly, is, I mean, like, again, I'm not on the road. I come out periodically, like I'll go to the California, the opening weekend, the Texas tour, and then and finals. And it's funny, that's been basically my tour since like '07. And regardless of the group, of the year, of the placements, of anything, there's some just consistencies through that. Like, you know, Paul will have a meeting with the members every morning, and we'll have a plan for the day. He'll kind of recap the night before, and it's just it's a conversation. I think making the members feel like they are part of the process. It's not like they could be replaced at any second by any other person on the planet or whatever. I think, like he says, it's just such a professional, I don't know, like we've done our job. We need them to do their job, and getting everybody on the same page. You know, I remember hearing another student talk about being in the drumline, a really long time ago, talking about how, you know, it's like Paul always I'm remembering this conversation that I overheard. It's like Paul always said, nobody's trying to make a mistake. Right. And like just having that kind of attitude as a teacher, like this kid is not trying to do this. They might not understand what you're actually trying to get them to do. And so kind of putting it more on us as the educators, you know, it's like, you know, at some point, that's what it's all about. It's not what like we've accomplished individually as staff members or, you know, in our own lives. It's about getting them to do this and reach that high level and putting them first. And ultimately that, you know, that's really been, you know, I think consistent. Paul doesn't also bring the music because he won't want to bring his glasses to rehearsal. And it'll be hot. And
let's look at these things, right?
Seriously.
Yeah, and so let's face it, it's not all that, but yeah, I was doing a clinic earlier today, and I found the score. I was talking about something from our 2018 show, and just trying to find the latest score, and it's so, you know, it was like from like May, and I'm like, I know this is totally not it, but we got to go with it. But yeah, we mean well.
I think playing drum set as background, like, and learning the way I learned. My entire upbringing was improvisation. You know, was learning through improvisation. When I learned how to write music, it was through transcriptions, through just getting your recording in your ear and sitting at a piano and figuring out what the notes were and figuring out how to sound the way you wanted to sound. But it was all an image of in your mind, and so I teach a lot by rote, and then a lot of parts are changed like in the rehearsals. Right. Like a lot of it, it's like you can write, in theory, you can get your playback to sound, you know, pretty good.
Oh yeah.
But the reality of what it really sounds like is that final filter. And so I think that's why we have to be there and really hear it. And so is it exactly the way it's supposed to come out or not? And I'm there to sort of make up the keyboard part or change the bass part or do something like right on the spot right there. And I think that's a huge part. You know, the whole by rote thing that we talked about earlier is huge. I mean, nothing goes according to plan, does it? Like in terms of the score, right? It just doesn't. And so you got to be ready for that. Like, so.
Yeah, well, I have this thing too where, you know, like I want the kids to be self-motivated. I never want to really be a yeller, and you know, I want to treat them like professionals. And the level that these drum corps are at, and the amount of money and time these kids are putting in, you know, you just said it. I mean, they're not trying to make a mistake. One of my things that, you know, I don't like to do is right after a show, bring the drum line in.
Yeah. I agree.
Now, it's one of these things, and I tell them, I say, listen, if I don't talk to you, it doesn't mean you sucked. It doesn't mean anything. It's best that we all think, and then the next morning, like you were just saying, like the next morning you'll recap. That's what I like to do, because like you said, you know, you've seen someone rip 3 snare drummers. I mean, I've seen it. You see it still. You walk by and you're like, really? Like maybe just get away. You know, if you want to come, you know, bring the kids in, whatever. I mean, I know people like to do that, but for me, it's like, all right, the next day. Too bad the critique isn't the next day. I'd be way better. Because, I mean, think about it. You're all cranked up. You're emotional about the performance. You got all the stuff in your mind, and you're like, oh, that was really good, and then you hear, and you're like, oh, really? Jesus, well, who? And then, right?
I'm the same way. You know what? I used to be really worried that I wouldn't meet them when they come off the field and not talk. And now I don't at all. Now it's just sort of expected. When we're done with the performance, nothing we're going to do is going to change that.
No.
The only thing that we're going to do is sort of let's sleep on it and let's discuss what happened.
Right.
Why, not only why did this go bad, but why did this go good? Why was that a better one than the night before? What did we do differently? How did you think about it? Can we sort of like capture that again and figure out why things happened and sort of translate, that thing? But yeah.
When you give the members a chance to actually digest it themselves, like if you're always telling them all the feedback constantly, then it really kind of inhibits their own ability to learn how to listen to what's actually happening. If they have to wait and they only know how to be told what just happened, like you want them to actually be able to learn how to articulate that.
The truth lies in the 5 minutes after you played. Right. The player knows exactly what
right.
And so isn't it amazing in drum corps how that can all change? If somebody told you that you didn't play well, then all of a sudden you think you didn't play well. When minutes earlier you thought you played really well, or the opposite is true. Like you knew you let some things go, and then someone said you played well, and then all of a sudden that changes.
That's right.
So we make a big deal out of making sure that like right after the show, they need to talk to each other, and they need to figure out what they felt about the show, and that's reality. Nothing else really.
Well, you were talking about you like to be out there, and I do too. I think part of it for me is if I'm not doing it, I'm not learning. Like if I'm not teaching, then I'm not learning how to be a better teacher. Yeah. If I'm not part of the process and cleaning it, then I don't really know what really needs to go on. So a lot of times for me is, again, I do Dartmouth and I do cadets. That's it, because I want to continue to grow, and I want to know exactly what the ins and outs are. Like, can I come into a group that I haven't seen and do whatever? Yeah. But I don't feel like I'm necessarily growing from that. Like when I'm out, like when I was out for 65, I tell you what, last year was like the toughest summer in my entire life. But here's the thing. I learned more last summer than in any summer that I did drum corps.
Yeah.
Because I learned about myself. I learned about, I shouldn't go there. All right, just back away. Walk away. And did a lot of that. Okay, walk away, Tom. Let it go. And I come back to it later. I have this thing like, if I'm angry 24 hours after I was angry, then I'll let you have it. Right? But usually if I walk away and let it go for 24 hours, I go, geez, thank God I didn't, react.
One of the problems in doing this for so long is that how it should be. Right? You've got so much experience that like you can see the car accident happening before it happens. And then it's tough. It's tough to not say it and to say, look, if we only did this would be, or, in terms of writing, right. I think that was part of the reason for the move to Vanguard, honestly, was your ability to have a bigger voice in the conversation about the program, about what we're doing, about how to showcase the percussion section, or how to make it fit in context of the whole thing, and just be able to offer that insight because of decades of experience, And I think that's the toughest thing. Don't you think? It's like not saying it, or just knowing when to not say it, and just sort of let things ride a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. I think you can write the best stuff, right, and you can do the best teaching job, but if all of that doesn't fit into the bigger picture, and the bigger picture isn't better, then it doesn't really matter, right? How it's staged is important. The overall, I learned that, a long time ago, where it was like we'd have, some drum lines where it was like we were getting numbers based off of what other sections were doing. Like if, back in 25 years ago, if the horn line had a bad show, and it was ensemble, whatever it was, I was like, wait a minute, did you hear the percussion? Oh yeah, but so they'd focus on the horns, or they focus on the color guard, or the staging. And so it was like, if everything's in place, what you're doing is better.
Right,
So
right.
to be part of that process of helping that, I think that's where I'm at too. It's like, I can just write parts, but if it doesn't fit in the overall design and the overall design isn't where it needs to be, it's going to affect what we're doing too.
The
Um,
best and worst part about drum corps, right? It's a group activity.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
I told Sandy this story right before we got on here, which is I remember the same as you. I can remember details that are kind of crazy in terms of just absolute memories of things that are precise. And I tend to remember a lot of things that if somebody says something positive, I try to really remember that, because it's so easy to dwell in the negative. It's so easy just to get like wrapped up in somebody that didn't like what you did or something like that. But I remember teaching Crown in 2000, and you came to one of our rehearsals, and we didn't know each other that well, but we knew each other through PASIC,
yeah,
taking. But evidently, I think it must have been like the Clifton show or something in Jersey or somewhere where you were actually at the same school or nearby, and you just saw us playing, and you just walked over because your guys were in visual rehearsal or whatever. And I remember, and 2000 was stellar. I mean, we were smoking clean, and it was
yeah.
really good. And I remember you kind of laughed, and you just looked up and you said, "Man, you guys would be like top three," And then you kind of joked about the fact that we were going to lose drums by a point, but you guys are really pretty good, but the fact was that what you said is exactly true, which is that the group activity, the fact that we were really hitting on all cylinders during that time, and it's sort of, it's part of the group, and if everything's not hitting on all cylinders, then some things don't even get recognized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's a reality. It's truth.
Yeah, well, you can, depending on where you feel the core is going to place near the end of the season. I mean, you can see the writing on the wall weeks before. So, ninth, eighth, seventh. So if you're in that bracket, then you can kind of figure out, well, what's the highest you can place in percussion.
Right.
You start to figure those things out. I think that's the one thing not that I was part of this era, but when the tick thing was going on, it was like you could just win ticks.
Right.
And so you had drum lines. Here's the thing, 83, we won brass, we won visual, we won just about everything, and we were 10th in drums. 10. And we won.
All right.
Yeah, I think we only won, it wasn't a big margin. 84 was the same thing, like 9th.
Yeah.
But it was because 83 was a tick thing. I think there was 11-man system, but you could have groups that were way up here in percussion, but the core was way down here. I mean, right now it's just so predictable that, yeah, you got to be in the top 5 even to be kind of considered now.
I remember when we were teaching Crown, the highest placement we could come in was 5th.
Yeah, 5th was like winning.
Yeah,
We
felt like we won.
Right.
We came in 5th. We felt like we won.
The core was like we were like in 11th, the 10th, 11th,
Because anything further, if you think about it, that would have displaced people in cores that were right next to each other.
Yeah.
And there would have been a disproportionate sort of spread system. One of the proudest things I think we've done was 2010.
Yeah.
Winning percussion with the core in 7th place. I thought was one of the most.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Difficult thing, and man, we were really having a good year. I mean, it was really hitting. There were some players in there that you probably would know now. That a lot of players that have gone on to do very good things. I remember how difficult that was for exactly what you're saying. It was really next to impossible. But
well, for us last year, we talk about like, success is kind of, you measure it different ways, right? Because one group's going to win and then everyone else is whatever. So for us last year, it was, particularly with the year that we had, I tell you what, the kids in the core, it was the most resilient group of kids. I mean, they came out, no matter what happened, all right, today we're going to change the ballad again for the 10th time. All right, today we're going to, and like, yeah, let's do this. I mean, the kids, they really drove the bus, man. It was like crazy. But so we knew percussively, like where we ended up, it was like that was our success because the core was in ninth.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there was something that, like to walk away from that, something that was really special for that group because yeah, it would have been nice if we were in the top five to see how that would all worked out for us. But so what do you think about the judging?
Well,
Right.
I mean, just to follow up what you just said, I think change is the enemy, don't you think? I mean, really, and I think that's one thing that I think is very tangible that we have gotten much better at, which is we don't once it's written and it goes through that first filter, it rarely changes now. And whereas before anything was up for grabs. I mean, you could wholesale, like you said. I mean, all of a sudden you get the word that the opener is going to change, or or the ballad's going to change. Right now, I think that for the past several years, the actual first version of things has lasted longer than any other time, and so we're getting better at getting it right the first time, I think. But the judging thing, I think we both feel like the judge should be able to go wherever he wants, whenever he wants to go there. And I completely understand the argument that's being made. One of the positive things, and I'll just put this out there, is that now there isn't these wholesale minutes of time where the judge misses everything. I think there is a part of me that says, you know what, if the guy's allowed out on the field, run around, there's an argument that a lot of people make that he's out of position, that he doesn't get to the exact right spot he's going to get to. Well, he sacrificed hearing everything just to get there to be in the wrong position. And so if the guy's going to miss, like what, 30, 40% of what's going to happen, well, I guess I'd rather him hear something than nothing.
Right.
And so I think that we've been pretty good. I don't know. I mean, the more experience you get, the more you can hear everything. You can hear. We need the judges to be in a position where they can hear everything.
Right. Well, I liked like the beginning of, I guess it was last year. I was like, or maybe it was the year before, where wherever we decided the judge was going to be pulled off the field, right? And I was with Scott Johnson going, maybe because I'm older again, because I was like, no, he's got to be out there. He's, the kids deserve it. And then after the season was over, I know last year I went, well, you know what? I don't know. I think it was pretty good. I think we are missing, and I've said this before, we're missing someone upstairs because we're putting all our eggs in this one guy. Yeah. We're saying that, the top marching percussion ensembles in the world are based on one guy standing in the front sidelines.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we have someone else could appreciate, how, what you wrote goes with the brass and how the front ensemble, you can't do that. And I'm sorry, like the best ensemble guys are percussion guys in my book. I mean, they really are. They just, because they're able to get that holistic, idea that, when I sat here, I mean, I just didn't sit here and write drum parts. I sit and I listen and,
right.
You try to coordinate. We're missing that, to me, that brings it all together, and that's where. But I don't know how you guys have been, but we've had the stage knowing that, so we know that we got to bring the drum line up, and in some respects, it's made the drum line, I guess, more prevalent in the show and more visible for all groups now, So,
I totally agree with it. I was on the task force when we implemented P2.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an absolutely crucial thing. I think everybody I talk to sort of agrees that, yeah, you need the picture of the whole percussion ensemble, or, how it fits. And then you need the, as up close as you can get, the detail of what you're playing. But, yeah, I agree about the I think we've tried to fix it a couple times with the ensemble, but doesn't it always just come down to the individual guy, the person? that is doing it, I think matters.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, we really are lucky. The design team at Vanguard is just, I mean, everybody, I don't know, everybody kind of, like we're all on the same page, like when the shows are being designed, I think, they're well aware of the fact that, okay, this judge is not going to be on the field anymore, and these are unique. Like, I don't know, we all just, again, are aware of the needs of each component, and the visual team understands that, and just, I think, it doesn't really seem to matter where the judge is going to be. They're going to hear.
Yeah,
I thought these guys have did a fantastic job at creating alleys and windows.
Yeah.
So like what you're saying about, like, we got to bring the drums up front. The solution that half the time is not to bin that. It's just not obstruct them with an alley that you can
Right.
see them, or you can hear them, like, not through like 5 layers of other people, but just sort of clearly see them. And that I found that some of the best staging that we've had has been sort of out on the field. When, don't you agree? Like when you bring them like really far forward, that creates a whole nother problem in terms of side balances and the way it relates to the front ensemble and all that. I kind of like it when there's like a visible sight line there, and you can hear them, and they're kind of in the mix out there. I think.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a, whatever you want to call it, like an ensemble sonority, that if they're not in certain areas, Hannah and I went through this at Crown, and it was, before I got there, there was one feature that they did. So the pit was here, and the drum line was, so if the pit went out to whatever, let's say the 30, the drum line was on like the 35 on an angle. So if you're sitting back,
Right.
it's almost like you're listening in your room, and you got the speakers on, and you're hearing the group kind of come out of that one, but then it's like, so there's I don't know if it's a balance thing that's weird. So that's one of the things that I keep talking about is, I don't mind certain things, but man, when we got to do it, it has to be in a pocket where what's coming at you is going to be what you should hear everything. It shouldn't be you're fighting, on this side to hear this, or, and all that. So, do you guys, I'm just trying to think, do you guys just like to have your front ensemble the way it is in the front, or have you thought about doing some things differently about moving them to side, putting them on the field? I mean, have you had those conversations, or you just go, you know what, this just sounds the best?
Well, they're the stars of the show, Tom. So front and center.
Yeah, well, definitely with your group. I thought your front ensemble last year was unbelievable. Seriously.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was incredible. But so yeah, I would agree with you.
It does kind of mess around with the fundamental nature of how they play. They receive sound from behind them, and the sound is moving forward, and then they pick it up. Yeah. And then they are masters at sort of playing together and making everything behind them sound right because of the way that they play. As soon as you start moving that around, then you've kind of relegated them to a role that they're not familiar with and they're not comfortable with, and then you sort of have to now start thinking that they're either not going to be involved in the show unless it's going to be related, and I think that we like to have them play, a lot, and I think that enables. I don't know. I guess maybe it's just I'm set in my ways about the way it frames the field. I think it when you watch a keyboard player play, if you get them, let's say you get them way back in the field, I think they kind of lose their effectiveness. You're sort of squinting and trying to figure out what they're doing, and I think there's a certain feel-good presence of them up front, and then that they sort of can do what they do, and they're never going to be struggling to be heard, or at least part of their sound is acoustic. It's not going to be entirely electronic. When you move them far enough back, it's entirely electronic.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, Neil and I talk about this a lot. Where, and again, I don't know. I keep saying it's an age thing, but I think trying a number of different things over 4 decades, you
yeah.
know, we're like, they just sound better here. They're gonna, we're right in the front. They're gonna feel more comfortable. They're gonna be feel more confident. If we want them to play well, this is what we need to do. Because there is conversation. Because you hear it from, I hear it from visual people. It's like this thing that's in the front here,
Yeah.
and I go, well, well, can we move them? I mean, 3 years ago, we had, we tried 10 marimbas, so we had one marimba was on like the 10.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then we moved the whole front ensemble section down. So the first marimba was on the 40. It was like 40 down, and it was like. It was just like the whole sonority was odd. Yeah, we were using the speakers, but we're like you're saying, you're missing that acoustic presence. These kids that were way down on the end, just instead of like performing, it was like they're playing.
Surviving. Yeah.
Well,
Surviving.
I can remember a few, like the first few times we went to WGI and just seeing some groups. And I think at that time, I mean, this is a long time ago, but I would see like, okay, this group has the pit just on the left side and they're like vertically over here.
Yep.
And I realized, man, I didn't look over there the entire show. It was like a recording. Like it could have just been a track playing through a speaker, and then I'm watching what's happening on the floor. And I think like what you said, like, when you take them out of there, like before everybody got rid of the shakos and the hats, like the pit they were the only musicians that were really connecting with the audience or in any way. And you could see them and you could see their faces and yeah. And maybe it's just my own stubbornness, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to be out on in the end zone. I can't, they can't move anywhere else. Like they're stuck with their instrument. So yeah, I would like to think that.
So, yeah, like if you put them out there and then they would have to not play for some significant parts of the show, there is no other element that they can, it's not like they're marching around. It's not like they're adding to the visual element because of the nature of their instruments. Now, I like I said earlier, I think that you're probably gonna get a lot of email about this and about how, but it's kind of true, I mean, you sort of, the instrument prohibits a certain amount of movement. Some people have moved their marimbas and it's been really effective, but it's probably required a serious load of planning to make that happen. Right. Now, all of our keyboards are connected through cables, and you have to, it would require like a serious amount of planning.
Yep.
For an effect like that to happen. But then once you get the marimba player out in the 10-yard line, like what is he contributing for most of the show? And like for our guys, I think there's a serious contribution for the front ensemble. I mean, you watch them, they kind of pull you in, and they sort of eventually, if you're in the stadium at all, you clearly can see over them, right. And it's not like they're a brick wall up there. I mean, they're players.
Yeah, I think it's it's I don't know. I don't want to say it's just from the visual people, but I get it. It's like they're trying to. They don't necessarily listen and watch the front ensemble, and so they try to make the field look cleaner. I mean, that was another reason why you get the percussion judge off the field. You see this guy running around, and part of this, spectacular visual moment, and there's the guy like in between the color guard, and knocks the color.
Don't you think that one of the unintended consequences, though, when you do that, is that most of the visual effect will be kind of more or less forced to be happening in that zone that you cleared out. Right. So everything kind of comes to the same spot, which ends up being a little bit redundant. Right. And I think that it's only natural that would happen because you've cleared that space out and you expect everything to kind of come there. And so I think that's sort of an unintended consequence of that.
So I want to ask you a question here because we have, and I'm going to, there's some questions that are popping up here. So I'm going to ask one question and then we're going to go to some of these. So it's kind of a loaded question, I guess, because next Thursday we talk about indoor percussion and how it has affected drum corps either in a positive or a negative way. Like, I think there's, like, for me, there's been some great things. Like, the players are better. like, players that we get to come try out, it's just the talent level is really through the roof compared to when it was maybe, 15, 20 years ago. Now you have to balance, so you have a couple kids that are marching Mystique or United Percussion. We can only do 3 camps because now these kids got to go and do indoor, right? So there's that. But I think the trade-off is cool because the kids they're learning how to perform in both groups, and we're learning how to use both the same kid for both groups, right? So I think in that perspective, it's been great because, man, some of just the talent level of the kids. But I have seen that we've stopped moving a little bit, and here's the reason. So the last 3 years of the cadets, we have had no injuries in the drum line, none. And we used to have injuries all the time. I'd go with 6 tenors, ending up with 5. I went with 11 snares with 9. If we had 4 tenors at the end of the season, we probably had 5 to start. So our theory was go big because something's going to happen. And it always did. Last 3 years, it didn't. Some of that, again, is, I'm sure some of it is how we're preparing and training the kids, But the other part is we're demonstrating physicality. We're not being physical for 5 minutes. We're, 93. You're talking about 93. 93 was our slowest tempo was 192. We were up in the 230, 240 range, and it was like, we had people in body casts in the front sidelines. Right? I mean, those, now you pull something and you get off the field, and a couple days you're back. And I sound like I'm an old kind of fart drum corps guy, saying that we don't move, but I do notice that. Now, I like the way the activity has gone. I like the costuming. I like all that. The lack of movement, I guess, doesn't necessarily bother me, but it's just one of those things I've kind of noticed. And then, I guess the positive, we don't have as many injuries. So what are your thoughts on the indoor? Primarily WGI. I mean, you obviously did indoor with PAS and UNT, and had some spectacular groups there. But now the activity has, it's really about WGI. So how do you feel about all that?
I mean, I'm a supporter of music, good music wherever it's played. I'm not. I don't have a blanket policy. I think a lot of people, a lot of younger players who kind of they kind of assume that I'm somehow against it, which I don't really know how that came to be, but it just sort of, I don't know. I've heard that a lot, so I guess. But they often have no idea that I did the UNT indoor percussion thing, which was the beginning of all of that, and it was. Right. Musically, PAS is an organization based on music. It's the music side of the fence. WGI is Winter Guard International, and by definition, it's more of a visually based thing, and they sort of meet in the middle a little bit. Regarding conflicts with members, I usually treat it with as a case by case basis. No question about it. I think it's almost impossible to come up with a general blanket rule. Like, we're not going to allow anybody in miss camps. Well, that doesn't work. So then it's like, I usually strike a compromise, and I usually try to connect with the instructor of the WGI group. And I think that, we set our schedule so far in advance, and we just let the players know, like, you're going to have to be here for this, this, and this, and this. Please let me know if there's a conflict. We don't change our schedule. And so not only the WGI thing, but oftentimes a university, like a concert band or a symphonic band, will call a rehearsal like on a Saturday, like the week before, and then they'll threaten the kid with failing the class or something. We never do that. Right. We really stick to our plan, and we publish our schedule so far in advance that I simply ask the player to communicate. They communicate to your instructor, communicate to everyone. If you ask them and try to plan for missing something, and you've done it 3 months in advance, they may not like it, but typically they'll say, okay, you told me about this, I get it, all right.
Yeah.
Or what oftentimes happens now is that I allow them to miss one camp. Like they get to choose. Like if you've got a regional performance, I totally get it. It's a big deal, right? And so we're not gonna sort of handcuff them and tell them they can't do it.
Right.
But I will say, like, if it's a rehearsal weekend, right, or if it's maybe a local show that you're the only one in your division that's going to be there, can we compromise a little bit? And I think that so far, I'd say in the last 4 years, it's worked out pretty well. I mean, I think that the longer it goes on, the more compromising the other instructors are, and the more they get what we're trying to do.
It's not. We don't have a lot of students. There's some in the battery, and a couple in the past few years, but it's a really small percentage of our kids that are doing that.
Yeah, we probably had the drum line last year. Everyone except maybe two, or I'm sorry, this year, everyone except two. We had a ton from Mystique, United. The whole bass line was United Percussion, which they rehearse basically an hour or hour and a half from where the corps rehearses. So we've kind of done 3 rehearsals or 3 camps and we're out, and then come back in April. Do a whole video thing. We the year before we learned like 5.5 minutes of music through the video stuff.
Wow.
I want to help. I want to help the kids out, and I want to work with the indoor groups because, the kids are better because of it. I mean, I wish we could have 2 or 3 more camps and have everyone there, right? But if I just say, well, that's what it is, then I'm not going to have.
Right.
I'm going to have some high school kids that don't have experience anymore. But with the indoor thing, I mean, do you kind of, have you seen that influence kind of, hop into Vanguard and what you guys are doing?
Definitely. There's no question about it. It's funny when you were talking, I was thinking, like, who's the camp for anyway? Is the camp for the kid or the member to learn how to play some better flam drags? And I started thinking that no, it's not really for that. It's really for the design aspect of it. You know what I mean? We want to hear the production. Typically, we will learn an entire production in a camp, right? We'll put it all together and get a recording on both Saturday night and Sunday morning.
Yep.
And we can walk away from that knowing what we need to adjust. And so without the players there, without a representation of the players, we're kind of spinning wheels. So I don't think it's necessarily for them to learn technique. It's for them to make those recordings and to get together and hear the music live. We basically have 3 music camps, and then the rest of the camps are dedicated visually. So we have to get our act together in a quick way. So we're talking like January, February, and March. If we can meet there, and realizing that we're going to miss like a good percentage of them for one of those camps. But that's kind of what we stuck to. But, teaching at California Corps, we definitely see the influence. I mean, no question about it. And I think it has a lot to do with their comfort level on stage, more or less. Their ability to perform, their ability to sort of be freer to play, to look like a natural musician out there just performing, rather than trying to eliminate that and be uniform. I think those days are kind of over.
Yeah, I think it's been a good thing. Like just what you're saying, the kids, I guess the performance etiquette, and just them putting their whole bodies and their being into performance instead of just their hands, And the kid. I mean, it's like. I mean, imagine, I always say, if like you go to a musical, you go to a play, and they're in their marching band uniforms doing Les Mis.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, that's a little weird, and they're just kind of marching around. And I think you can create a mood or an emotion with the costumes and the props. And, I know people, I read stuff. I think I've been on Facebook more now in the last 16 weeks because of having more time. And some of the stuff I read, I'm just like, wow, like, I don't know. There's things people talk about that I would never think about, or they'll say stuff about, the props are stupid and, and all this kind of stuff. But I like that influence. I like, because I'm doing it with Dartmouth, and I can see that.
We have dedicated staff members. I mean, we have, I'm thinking like Wayne Harris and Andy Toth and Michael Rosales. And I mean, I could name like the entire visual staff is involved. It's not about anything but what you're talking about. It's interpreting the whole thing, like understanding what you're doing and sort of delivering it to the audience.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to a couple questions here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know if I should ask this one because this could take a while, but we can do it quick. Can you talk about your approach to battery tuning? Like, do you have an overall scheme?
Okay. You know what? This is funny because, like I said, I learned to play by rote and I learned to play primarily drum set. So early on, just by the sound of the drums, I could sort of make my drum set sound like John Bonham or Joe Morello. Yep. I could tune my drums and I could really change the way they sound. But I'm telling you, when I was teaching by myself and I had to be responsible for tuning, I learned everything from those moments. I would say when we had 7 quads in the 94 VK, every day.
John Burbank was in that.
Yes, he was. Yeah. Every single day, somebody from the line would bring me dinner from the food truck and I would start tuning before we loaded the drums onto the truck. And I learned so much about tuning. I learned almost everything that I know today. I can tune very quickly. I know which lugs are going to affect certain sounds. And I learned all that through just like hard living, just tuning like a massive amount of drums intensely for a couple of summers in a row. And so, I kind of, like I've said many times, I kind of know what I want it to sound like, and I figured out over a long period of time how to get that. And yeah. I understand the ranges of the drums. I shoot for a resonant vibration. So if the drum is tuned higher than it's meant to, like outside of its range, it's going to project less. What that immediately affects is volume. And so if you hear a group that's behind the center X and all of a sudden they disappear and you can't really hear them anymore, well, it's probably because they're outside of that resonant vibration range.
Right.
And so I keep it like right in the sweet spot, but just a little bit higher. And then I notice that I can hear them wherever they are on the field. Yep. And I think I leave it a little more open because the ring of the sound of the drum is going to be the thing that carries the sound to the audience. And so if we get too muted, then once again, we sort of defeat the purpose and we lose the sound of the drum line if they're not like right up in your lap.
Yeah.
So that's basically the answer.
All right, let's keep going here. There's a bunch here. So what is the driving force behind your use of back fulcrum technique with your front ensemble members? This is to Sandi. Did you get that? Should I read that again? What is the driving force behind your use of back fulcrum technique with your front ensemble members? So,
I think that we I don't know how much, and this would be maybe a better question for the day-to-day instructors, but I think that we definitely are holding on in the back, but again, I play that way now. I think we kind of use that for all things. Like we've just discovered where it feels better to hold the mallet. I don't know that we really specify and get the slide rule out and make, we focus a lot on, timing and listening and ensemble playing, quality of sound and right notes. And that's pretty much the big, use the technique that hits all the right notes at the right time, whatever that is.
Right. Well, Paul we were talking about this earlier about just technique, like, you can overdo it. You can over technique. You can talk about, here's the thing I noticed too is, so, you start playing, you start going, all right, you cut off and I watch this, the more they play, things just start to go away.
Yeah.
You know, the sound starts to get better. You know, some of the setup maybe is better, and you know, it's almost like they got to get their hands and their mind in gear to playing. So, so I've noticed like, well, I don't have to say 20 things. I can say five, and 20 things are going to get better because we're going to continue to play. And and you know, again, just after doing it for so many years, you go, I'm not going to worry about that one. I'm not going to worry about that one. Let's talk about this. And my bass tech, Steve Kiefer, he would come in and he couldn't do a lot of the tour. He'd come in maybe for 5 days. He'd say six things in 5 days, and the bass drums were 10 days better. Like he'd come in and I'm going, why are you guys better? And he put his hand up. I go, what'd you say? And I didn't say anything. I did this. You know, I did like turn the wrist. He just knew what to say, and those guys played for him, and automatically they were just way better. So I think you can, you know, you can out talk it or out think it or out technique it. And I've noticed too, like some guys will ask me some questions. So why do you do this? And I go, I didn't even know I did that. I didn't even know the line did that, but you know, I don't know. I'll think about it. You know, I mean, you know, because people are very observant about things that, you know, I may not even be aware that we're doing it. So,
well, and there's that human factor too, Tom. I mean, these aren't just one person playing, right? And it's not math. I know we try to explain musical concepts to our kids that are, you know, in percussion now, and it's, you know, it's not always A plus B equals C. And
right.
There's just a lot of other parts to it. And I think for younger students or just students that want to know, like, okay, if I do all these things on the list that you're saying to do, then I'm going to play like this.
Right.
And, you know, I wish it could be that simple sometimes, but ultimately there's just a lot of self-discovery that has to happen in there that we can't skip.
All right, here's a question to me, and the answer is no. All right, next one. Oh, right. Any chance the cadets will ever march a cymbal line again? You know, probably not. I mean, we our last cymbal line was 92. I'm not against it. I mean, I use cymbals at Dartmouth. You know, I didn't for a long time, and then I started using them. I just kind of feel like sometimes we still can create the sounds up in the front ensemble. And right now there is a number. There's a cap. You know, the color guard wants what they want. The horn line wants what they want. You know, I think really like the Vanguard cymbal line it's because it's almost like a, you know, it's a, whatever you want to call it, a fixture of the core. It's just like with
iconic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is. So I think it's a little bit different, but to have a cymbal line, you know, maybe if the numbers were more and we had 4 or 5 spots, I'd think about it. But you know, sometimes, I mean, I think cymbal lines can overdo it too. It's like ching ching chung chung calm down, you know, it's like whoa, like the cymbal lines are playing bass parts. Are they really adding what's going on? And I'm not against cymbals at all. I mean, Hannum wrote a thesis. It's like 500 pages on marching cymbals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, it's every little, you know, detail of how to play any kind of sound you want. All right. To Paul, Sandi, I'm a high school instructor. I have several students interested in drum corps. I'd like to know what your advice is for students coming up with who are interested in going into the activity. So what is some advice for you guys?
Simple bit of advice is to make sure that maybe you get together with somebody that is actually doing it. You know, a lot of players will ask before auditions like what they can do. I think that probably the best thing is to get together with one of the players in the line. Get together like one-on-one with somebody that's actually doing it. You know, and there's a lot of guys in our line that I would trust. A lot of players that are both in the front ensemble and the battery that I would completely trust to sort of like get together with a younger player and really be patient and show them kind of like, here's what I learned and here's what I think helped me. And then I think that would be probably the best advice, I think, to get together with a current player.
Yeah.
Well, also just doing your homework when people are looking to see, like, you know, I live in, you know, maybe your limit, like what part of the country do you live in? Or are you going to be flying from Europe for every camp? Or, you know, maybe do your homework, like find now with, you know, YouTube, you can see every group, you know, that's out there, you know, contact the teacher. You know, maybe you might not want to be part of something that you thought of, like just how you would look if you're looking at college programs. The same thing. I would make a connection with those instructors, or just do your homework before you
Yep.
commit all that time and energy.
Well, the cadets are running a summer program. It's called The Edge, and it's basically, we're going to run some camps coming up. Probably 3-day camps here in July for brass and percussion. But we're running lessons too, Zoom lessons, obviously right now. So to this instructor or these people, if you wanted to go to cadet.org, we could sign you up with an instructor. And maybe your interest is not the cadets, but I think the way maybe your kids teach, or Blue Devils or the cadet. I think there's enough information that they could get out to that player to guide them. My son's he's one of my snare techs, and he marched Blue Devils for 3 years. So if you wanted to do that, go to cadets.org and we'll hook you up with one of the instructors.
Honestly, the audition experience, the one thing that a lot of people learn and they take away for it, they just understand almost immediately at what level they have to play at. Like, you know what I mean? Just the reality of, okay, if I want to be in this group, I'm going to have to be able to play this.
Yep.
And I think just that cold water kind of, just the understanding, like the getting together with a player, whether with any corps, really gets them to understand that very quickly.
Yeah. All right. So a couple more here. I think we're going to wrap it up here. How has the evolution of hybrid rudiments helped evolve your percussion writing over time? This is to me and to you, so I'll let you go, Paul.
I think I've just tried to be creative about just rhythmic relationships, modulations, and polyrhythms, and just trying to like take it to that next level. I think there is a natural feel that I try to maintain, and I don't know how you feel about it, but like when I get like if there'll be, it seems to be like, I don't want to say trendy, but it seems to be not that uncommon for the more awkward it feels, the cooler the part that they think it is. And for me, I don't think that way at all.
Right.
If it doesn't feel right on my fingers on the table, or if it's a weird combination of things, it seems to be where it does cross that line for me, where I will always try to rework it so that it has like a flow to it, like a natural sort of voice leading, and then, however creative I can be with the rudiment itself. The one thing that I think does get a little concerning is when it becomes kind of trendy, right? When you're writing and you kind of in the back, like you can hear, and we can point out over the last 10 years, like there'll be like the flavor of the month, like the rudiment that all of a sudden appears and everybody plays it, right? And then it becomes like the hand-to-hand roughs or the fours, or there is a little bit of a sense of like, I feel like people want you to put all that stuff in. It seems a little compulsory to me, so I try to not necessarily go there right away, but try to be as creative as I can and try to hide those things in the music a little bit.
Well, I think for me, it's like it has to be kind of my writing arsenal. And so last 15 weeks, I've probably practiced 2 hours a day. I learned Phantom Cajun. You ever hear that?
What is it?
It's called the Phantom Cajun. And it's licks that the Phantom Regiment played back in, like, I guess the 80s.
Right.
So it was free download. I had my kids in my high school learn it, and I was like, some cool stuff in here. I was like, this is really cool. So I started doing some of that stuff. But the thing is, it can't, like you said, I have to have a flow in how I write stuff. So if it's awkward for me to do it, it just doesn't fit into the fabric of the music, and I like to kind of move forward in what I'm doing, but at the same time, the music will kind of dictate what I'm going to do. If I force rudiments in it, it doesn't end up right. It's like sometimes I'll let guys, all right, write that snare feature for it. Let me see what you got. right? It almost seems like, you know, the channel changed on the TV all of a sudden.
Right.
Because there's something about like the energy and the rhythm or the rudiment that just doesn't flow right. So I'll have to kind of go back, and I do it at school sometimes. I'll have some of my kids, my seniors. I'm like, hey, can you write? What does that feel like? I'll write a sketch, and then you kind of do your thing, around the drums or something like that, and then I'll try to doctor it so there's a flow to it. And that whole idea about voice leading, to me, that's gone. I like to think like that. Like sometimes quad parts to me, it's just like, I don't know, you're just like out of your mind. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like there's no tonal separation within the sound of the part, if that makes sense, So sometimes I'll write something and, hey, you want me to doctor that up? I'm like, no, I kind of like it on the 4 drum. It kind of goes with the snare part, and it's only for 4 counts, by the way. Do we always have to go like this? So
I spend more time probably doing the quad parts than almost anything. It's just really thinking about that and really trying to make them an independent part that the way that the instrumentation sort of interacts with each other and make them sort of independently existing and kind of leading to places and using the pitches of the drums to help me out with that.
Yeah, well, I think I don't want to say the younger guys don't think like that, but they don't. I think it's more about like the technical RAM on an instrument, on the quads. Like what can be the highest technical RAM you can play on there, or on a snare drum, or on a bass drum. Man, it was like the bass drums for me at Cadets the last couple of years. I said, it's not about all this split stuff where I don't even know what's going on. It's about the quality of your individual playing, and how about it actually goes with the music and has some direction. It's all good. I'm not dogging on the young.
We talked about this earlier too, about the pendulum that swings. There was a time that I probably would agree, like the early 90s through the mid 90s, where less is more. It was all about being tasteful and being reserved. And I remember getting my hand slapped many times for having the group play too much. And then the pendulum completely swings in the other direction, and then like you're not playing enough, and then But I think that what we try to do, both from every aspect of the percussion ensemble, is to try to communicate something. To try to make somebody feel something. I want somebody to like pump their fists a little bit, or say, "Give me a hoot and howl," or I want people to feel something. I think that when you get to the point what you're describing, technically really challenging and difficult and interesting, then there is a chance that you can just be washed over by that. And then you sort of stand there with your arms crossed and not really feel much of anything. And yet at the same time, you acknowledge that how good they are and that it's really complicated, but there's no like raw feeling of, you know what I mean? Like the communication. We were listening to some the other day, right? And kind of getting teared up listening to it. Just the emotional like communication that was happening was like, it was powerful, know? And I think that's what we try to go for every time.
Well, I think if you get so pigeonholed on, I just want this to be like the coolest lick that I've ever played in my life. I mean, the whole show can't be full of that. And to have the players really understand that, it can't just all be about them at all times, and they have time, whether it's, the primary or the secondary or whatever their role is at any point in the show. I think if they understand that, then that's when you get to that level of like that, the fact that it is a group and all the cylinders are firing and you have those kind of moments. I think it's really hard for somebody to achieve that just, with any one section or one part. I think it's always in conjunction with the whole thing.
Right. Well, I just think it's, sometimes not that I don't care what is actually going on, but the clarity of intent's important. I have to know what that is. Right. If the clarity is there, then okay. If not, then, like if you're doing, they have terms for some of the bass drum licks, and check it out, the bottom 3 are playing that, and well, it sounds like dryers in a or shoes in a dryer kind of thing. I was like, okay, well, what? There's no clarity in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but check like the kid. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, but it doesn't. It's like a tuba playing some kind of trumpet lick.
Yeah.
That you go, well, I don't know, it just doesn't. It doesn't. It
It's
doesn't
like
work
an
on my-
inside joke. It's like only the inside guys get it. And I
Yeah,
think that we're all probably should be aware that we're living in a world that everybody should get it.
right.
Everybody who sees the show should get what you're doing. And it's I think it's kind of fun to figure out how to play difficult, new, unique stuff within the context of everybody getting it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you guys have done a great job with that. I mean, it's from the front to the back, and I mean, I think your holistic approach musically and the quality and really just, it's like, yeah, you guys win. And, it's not like, Jesus, why are they winning? No, well, because they're better at everything. Everything whatever list you make up, it's like you guys are proving that, and that's. Back in the day when Neil and I had a bunch in a row and stuff, we thought like that. It was very holistic. We had everything. The system was in place. You had, the texts were from the line. It was almost like it was in some respects it was too easy because when we left, that's when we realized like, well, it's hard to have that. Like we just kind of did it. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden we leave and we go somewhere else. It's like, oh Christ, this is not. We can't even recreate this. And it's something I've been trying to recreate. And then you look back and you go, man, it was not that it was easy, but it was things I worry about now, or when I worried about when I left, I didn't worry about.
No.
Because it was just this thing that just kind of kept. We always, every year that I taught, we always thought we were going to win percussion and we were going to win. Every year. It was like, and if we didn't, it was probably something in the show that, like, 95. I thought it was a great show. But we couldn't get the drum sets off the field. Right? They were stuck on, seriously, we had 10 drum sets and we couldn't get them off the field. We never figured it out. And to this day, it was the difference for us.
Yeah.
In all aspects of what we were doing. So things like that, you walk away, go, I don't know if that's being cocky or what that was back then. I mean, we're not like that now, but it was like, I think just everything was in place and it just kept evolving and moving forward. And a lot of
we have so many years in the trenches. Sandy reminds me often that we've lost way more than we've won.
You mean that so nicely, but it's just a little bit of reality.
Yeah.
Like that can't be the only reason that we do this.
No. Well, that's what I was saying. It's like success is measured differently. I mean, for us, last year was, for the percussion, it was probably the most successful percussion group I was part of because of where we came, what we had to deal with. We never had a field. We had one field and we had like an hour and a half. So the drumline had to learn how to function on their own. Some of this was through indoor. We just made up stuff in the parking lot to get them, familiar with like not having a field, you know what I'm saying? Like we wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now it's like, well, this is what we got. So we were successful despite not having any practice, sleeping for 12 hours a day. And God was like, the kids were up and we got like 4 hours before we even start rehearsal.
Right.
It was a crazy thing. So in my mind, last year was probably the most successful percussion program because of, we tried to get off and go right and the bus went left. It was just all season was like that. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up. I know it's a little after 9 and you have 3 kids. I'm not sure what time they go to bed. Maybe they put themselves to bed.
No. You know what? With the pandemic,
Oh man,
our schedules have completely got so switched around. It's kind of crazy.
our 7-year-old will like roll out of bed around noon some days. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
She'll come down at like literally 11:30 at night and sort of looking for some tape and some scissors because she's got a project going on upstairs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I'm glad you guys came on and had a chance to kind of talk to you. And I think, like, for me, I do this because we don't have drum corps, but I want to learn too. So I enjoy talking about stuff, you know, and I think we probably have a lot more in common on how we do things, you know. And I don't think that's just because we're from Pennsylvania.
Right. Maybe it is.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of things that are inherent when you're putting a program together and you're consistent. And this is fun for me. I love talking about these kinds of things, and I hope the viewers, enjoyed it too. And what I try to do too, and I'm kind of saying this to the viewers, is I'll get on Facebook, maybe not tonight, but tomorrow. And if you have some questions that we didn't answer tonight, I'll try to get on there. I did it last time. Woke up the next morning about 9, not 5:45, but 9. Went on and I tried to answer some of the questions as best I can. And I think the other thing which is really cool is by doing this, we all realize that yes, we're competing, but it's about the kids. It's about what they learn from competing and what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. And we're all trying to make it here. It's not like we're enemies at all. And I think people think that sometimes. Some of that comes from Charlie and Dennis were talking about. And Marty. It was just like this, And it's not like that. It's like the education of the kids is better, and I think we're all we're focused on the right stuff. So
I miss seeing you in critique and all. I always like that sort of when everybody's there and we just can talk about different stuff.
Yep. Good.
Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it.
This is like a date night. This is
Well, perfect. I'm glad we could go out. Feel like the third wheel, I guess, right? All right. Well, take care. Have a good summer. We'll see you somewhere down the road here. Thanks. Thank you to the viewers. And next Tuesday and Thursday, we have some more discussions. Brass on Tuesday and Thursday's percussion. So, all right, guys. Take care. Thank you, Justin. See you guys. Bye-bye.